Does it taste like spicy in here to you? Well, it should, because we're picking up right where we left off with the 1986 Porsche 944. We're getting spicy. Now, I don't know exactly why spice is the particular flavor when it comes to this Porsche 944. It just kind of, you know, it gets the taste buds excited. Now, if you missed the last episode, and the one before that for that matter, this is my 1986 Porsche 944 base model, the non-turbo. If you missed those episodes, please do me a huge favor. Go back and watch them, just so you can get all of the context and get spooled up to where we're at right now. But basically, today, we are going to start digging into this thing. In the last episode, we did a full inspection of this thing and made a whole list of everything that needs to be done for this thing to be race ready. And by race ready, I mean just ready for autocross events. So therefore, we're not doing a ton to it, but we're just kind of going to do the bare minimum. In the spirit of keeping things budget friendly around here, just like how autocross is, we're not going to go through and do all of the while you're in there. So we're basically just going to tackle all of the stuff that needs to be done to bring this thing up to maintenance snuff. So with that, let's get into the details. Before we get super far into this video, I just want to take a quick moment to let you guys know that FunAhead TV officially has merch. That's right, your boys got merch.
Squid's got jeans!
We've got a really nice t-shirt and a really nice full zip hoodie available. Both have a small logo on the front and a big one on the back, but they're high quality garments. They come pre-washed, so there's no risk they'll ever shrink up on you. You can wear them for years to come. The hoodies are super durable. You can wear them in the house, in the shop, whatever you want to do. So if you're looking for a great way to support one of your favorite YouTubers and get some high quality clothing, head on over to funaheadtv.com and get yourself some merch today. Thank you guys so much. Let's get back to the video. Right now, we've got a pretty serious fuel leak somewhere in this area, and I'm not 100% sure where it is, but I believe it has to do with the cylinder 1 injector. I believe this is our culprit right here, and within a very short amount of time, it coats the entire area right in here with fuel. It's really hard to tell just because of how fuel is.
Because of the way it is.
Obviously, when it kind of touches a surface, it dissipates very quickly. So it's hard to like decipher the exact source if I'm not seeing it flow. So obviously that is very much not ideal and inherently a huge fire risk. So we're gonna go ahead and tackle that first and foremost, just because, well, if this thing burns to the ground, then obviously there's no use in doing everything else that we need to do, because we'll be working with a piece of charcoal. First things first, second, third, and fourth, I'm just going to go ahead and begin by taking off all of the stuff around the fuel rail here. That should be all that we need to remove in order to gain access to the injectors here. But either way, we're going to have the entire fuel rail off. That way we can inspect all of the injector O-rings and hopefully be able to find an obvious culprit. I have a development. I hope you can see this okay. Hopefully my camera's focusing on it all right. But here is the injector from number 1. When you look at these O-rings, however, well, I mean, they look old, right? And they're definitely not round and they're pretty smashed down, but they're not cracked and they're not leaking. So as bad as these O-rings are, this is not our culprit. I believe I've found the culprit. Let's go take a look at that now. Well, the culprit is here. This line is the one that connects from the lower side of the, I think this is the fuel pressure regulator, up into the upper side of the fuel rail. This upper connection was very tight, going actually into the fuel rail. This lower one, which coincidentally is right next to where, or very close to where, the injector 1 sits, so easy to mistake a fuel leak. This was finger tight, and when you look at how these actually seal, well, they're kind of a cone shape and they go up and into these fittings here, so you actually need some serious pressure on these in order to have them seal. I am fairly positive that that was our culprit. So all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and very gingerly put all of this back together. Hopefully we can tighten down that one joint that was actually leaking sufficiently enough to be able to test it and make sure that we don't actually have any fuel leaks. Now that we have everything all bundled up with the exception of the beauty cover that goes over the fuel rail, I'm going to go ahead and fire this puppy up and make sure that we're not seeing any fuel leaks still. And if we're not, we can go ahead and throw that beauty cover on and call this job done.
Alright, now I hope you guys will be able to hear me okay. Basically, it looks like, let's see if I can get the light on it. It's the number 2 injector, actually, that is leaking now. And I don't recall seeing that little bit of fuel before. But the good news is the number 1 injector is perfectly dry. So we're just going to go ahead and pull everything back apart and see what we can see with regards to injector 2.
Alright, quick update. I went ahead and swapped the O-rings on this injector. I'm going to go ahead and swap all of the injector O-rings now, put it back together, and we'll get it started. I won't bore you guys with the details. Let's get to it. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is becoming quite the song that never ends. Unfortunately, I put it all back together, and the number 2 injector is still leaking from near the intake manifold. I can't tell exactly where it's coming from because, again, fuel propagates. It's hard to tell what the source is, but it's definitely got a nice flow going on. So, I'm guessing at this point it is a faulty injector. It might have a crack in it somewhere. I don't know, like somewhere in the body of it, but it is definitely just letting fuel go. Anyway, gotta get this thing back apart, and then we'll take a close look together at that injector and see if we can see anything broken or cracked on that body. The update champion is at it again with another update. So here's an update. I have all the injectors plugged into the fuel rail, as you can see, and as we know, injector 2 is a potential culprit. It definitely seems like the leak is coming from below this line on the injector somewhere, but again, it could be coming from down here and then propagating upwards. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is turn the key forward so that we pressurize the fuel system. Hopefully, we'll be able to see exactly where that leak is coming from. All right, here's what's happening. Look, the first injector, as you can see, it's got a steady drip. I just wiped this off, and it's pressurized. Oh, we got a bad injector, and it seems like maybe more than one. As you guys can see way up close, the fuel is not above or that far above where the orange ring is. So therefore it's not dripping down from above there and coming down. It appears that it's leaking right around here and just seeping out. And even though this one is not currently doing that, the number 2 injector that was just giving me all sorts of issues, I have a feeling that it's also doing that. And for some reason, I'm just not getting that to pressurize. Because remember, initially, I had the problem with the number 1 injector. It was happening there, not at number 2. But then, the problem somehow moved itself to number 2. Sorry if I seem a little frustrated. I am. I spent all afternoon on this, and I meant to only spend like an hour on this, tops. Having to take this fuel rail apart like 5 different times. And, you know, it is what it is. Sometimes that's the way it goes. Alrighty everyone, well it is now the next day. As you can see, we are back in the proper attire for working on Porsches, my teeny tiny little itty bitty sport coat. Anyway, I decided to call it a day shortly after talking to you guys last because I needed to solve some issues with regards to injectors for this car. Right away, like one of the big things that I'm noticing about working on a 38-year-old, almost 40-year-old car is that parts availability is not super prevalent depending on the part you're looking for. This car being that it is, well, like I mentioned in the very first episode about this car, largely a slept-on car these days, and even though there's a lot of them out there still in existence, well, it's not one that is super popular, that has parts stocked like crazy on every single website. So very long story short, needless to say, without further ado, whatever other segue term I feel like using right now, I had trouble finding injectors. Pelican Parts said that the injectors were on the site from GB Remanufacturing. However, they actually were not. When you went to click on it, it said out of stock. FCP Euro was out of stock, and the parts are back ordered. Every other site that carries parts for European cars, back ordered. I could either get on Amazon and buy some cheap knockoffs, or I could get on eBay and buy some cheap knockoffs. And honestly, when it comes to injectors, I don't feel like risking it. I don't want to get some cheap knockoff injector that's going to have a really crappy spray pattern or could potentially stick open and then cause hydrolock inside my engine and do some serious damage. Not about to risk that. So I decided to go down avenue number 2, which is having the injectors from this car get remanufactured or rebuilt. There's a company that I just mentioned a second ago called GB Remanufacturing, which you can send your parts into and they will remanufacture them and send them right back. So they're currently in the mail on their way to GB Remanufacturing on the West Coast, I think. In the meantime, we still have plenty of things to do, even though our fuel rail is looking very sad right now, being dismantled and all and injectorless. We are going to go ahead and continue down the road of fixing some of the other items. Next item on the list is the timing belt and balance shaft belt. We're going to go ahead and start taking things apart so that we can get access to that. So with that, let's get to it. I'm going to go ahead and start getting all of the thickness out of the way. And by thickness, I just mean airbox, intake tube, distributor, wires, all the stuff on the top side of the engine that we're going to kind of need out of the way in order to gain access to the timing belt area. Going to start getting to that. Back on the bench here in the workshop area, I've got all the parts that I just took off the car. One thing I just wanted to go point out to you guys really quickly is that this sticker right here was a sticker about when a timing belt service was done. It is next to impossible to read, and you guys probably won't be able to see it on camera, but it says mileage 110,900, which is more or less what the odometer is currently reading because, like I said, the odometer has not worked in over 10 years. And then below that it says 09/2015. So 8.5 years since that timing belt was done, and who knows how many miles. Let's go ahead and take a look at these really quick. As you can see, he's had a lot of life left in him, and by that I mean these were shot. This is what happens when you don't drive your cars, people. Drive your car. Now let's look at the power steering belt. 2 different spots where the belt was completely like tearing. So she was cherry. These belts are absolutely cherry. Yeah, cherry. Alright, so next up I'm going to go ahead and take off these 10mm bolts that are holding the timing cover on. Alright, well, let me go ahead and get you guys in here so you can see what I'm going on about. Here it is. We've got the cover off, as you can see, and there is in front our balance shaft belt. That belt runs 2 different balance shafts. One is right here at the top, and then the other one is way kind of down at the bottom of the engine there. And then, of course, we've got our timing belt behind the balance shaft belt. Right off the bat, I am thinking that it's very, very, very possible that the balance shaft belt is too loose. I mean, I'm barely touching this thing, and it has got a lot of play in it. And also, when you just look down the belt, you can see that it's got like some bow out to it. So that tells me that it's very possible that this thing has maybe skipped some teeth over time. We'll just have to put this thing in top dead center and see if all of the balance shafts line up perfectly. But right off the bat, I'm kind of thinking they're not. Timing belt, well, good news is it's not in catastrophically bad shape. In fact, it looks like it's in fine shape. Fortunately, with regards to the timing belt, it did have a lot of life left in it. It didn't look anywhere near as bad as what the serpentine belt looked. There's no cracking in it. At least looking from where I'm looking, it does not look like there's any weird cracks in it or anything concerning. At least we know that it wasn't about to smack valves. I think what I am going to do, just for funsies, is go ahead and turn the crank until the engine is in true top dead center, and then see if everything is in fact lining up. Well, check this out. I went ahead and got everything in top dead center. You can tell because of the way it is.
Because of the way it is.
And by that I mean, if you look at this line on the cam right here, the cam gear, you can see that it is lining up with the case on the engine perfectly. Well, yeah, just about perfectly. And then you need to come to the very back of the engine to check the crank. Basically, there's a tiny little peephole that looks through the bell housing. There's a little stamp in the flywheel that says OT. and then you need to look for the line that says OT to line up with the line, the reference line, and that's how you know the crank is in top dead center. So that's how we tell when the cam and the crank are in top dead center. Let's talk about the balance shafts really quickly. So one thing about this engine, ever since I got it, which, I mean, granted, I've put 10 miles on this car, but one thing about it that I've noticed is that it vibrates terribly. At first I thought it was engine mounts, but then when I looked at the engine mounts, actually they're really not all that bad. So good news, bad news situation here. Good news is engine mounts likely are not bad. Bad news is the balance shaft belt is completely just not even close. You can see the little notch right here in this cam cover, and then there's a little notch on the balance shaft gear that has to line up with this notch right here, and that's how you can tell in this balance shaft's case that it's lined up. Now, unfortunately, that notch is nowhere to be found. It is currently, I think, about 180 degrees away. And then I looked at the bottom balance shaft, same story there. Neither of them are lined up. To reiterate, once the engine's in top dead center, the notch on the balance shaft gear needs to be lined up with the notch on the housing here. That's how you know that it's in its correct orientation. Same with the bottom one. Neither of them are even anywhere close. So therefore, these balance shafts have been out of phase for who knows how long. Regardless, this is very exciting because that means we can do the very satisfying tasks of putting this thing back together the right way.
I just want to go ahead and give you guys a reference for what I was talking about. So right here is the bottom balance shaft, and on the back side of this sprocket should be the alignment groove that lines up with this tab right here. And as you can see, when you look closely, it is nowhere to be found. I did rotate the engine to find it, and it wasn't even close. So again, that is indicative that both balance shafts are completely out of phase with one another, which explains why we were getting such intense vibration from the engine while it was running.
All right, so to take the balance shaft out, we're gonna have to loosen the 17 mil, and then we can turn this 24 millimeter to then loosen up the belt tension. And then from there, we should be able to slide it over one of these sprockets to get the belt out. So, as you saw, we just took off the balance shaft belt. Easy peasy, not a big deal. That was the lower pressure of the two. Now it's time to take off the timing belt, which, if you don't know, well, once we take the timing belt out, the crankshaft and camshaft are officially disconnected. Now, I know that sounds very intense, but you know what? It's really not. There are plenty of things that you can reference and many indicators on the engine that as long as you know what to look for, it's not going to be a problem at all to put this thing back in time. So I've already mentioned the notch on the cam gear, making sure that that's lined up. That is our indication that the engine is in true top dead center. Not just crank top dead center, but engine top dead center, cylinder 1 top dead center. Why is that? Well, because of course actual true top dead center only occurs every 720 degrees of crank rotation, because 4-stroke, right?
Because of the way it is.
So therefore the cam gear is what truly indicates to us that the engine is in top dead center. We can check for the crank top dead center in two places. One is the peephole in the back that I mentioned, but I just noticed there's also a notch on the very front face of the engine. You probably can't see it very well, but you can probably see my Sharpie mark on the little sprocket down there that's on the crankshaft. Now I have put that like little trough perfectly in line with that notch, and that is indicative that we are in crank top dead center. We won't need to, double check that and then check the cam, check that, check the cam. We'll be able to just look here and then look here as we're installing the new timing belt to make sure that both are in phase with one another. So that's a lot of words, but hopefully all of that makes sense. Let's go ahead and take the tensioner down so that we can pull this old timing belt off. Like I said, it's a big moment. No, I'm just kidding. Let's just do it. We got that timing belt off. Let's take a quick look at it. This is the timing belt, and as I said, it looks to be in pretty good condition. Nothing crazy bad about it. Obviously, it's a little bit old, but not awful. It wasn't about to pop on us, which is nice. And then same with the balance shaft belt. I mean, yeah, honestly, this thing looks like it's in pretty good shape. But even though the belts weren't too concerning, let's go take a look at something that is quite concerning. I was really trying to avoid doing a water pump in this car. And my thinking with that was, well, okay, we know that the water pump was done about 10 years ago, or a little over 8 years ago, I guess, rather. Time is not as big of a factor on those. Mileage is a factor. time and mileage is a factor on rubber belts. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, water pump was done not quite a decade ago, but it doesn't have that many miles on it. Well, it seems like potentially they didn't do the water pump as well. Let me show you what we're looking at. So down here is the water pump pulley, and I don't know if you can see that, but there is some pretty serious play in that bearing right there. That should not be that way. And then when we spin the water pump, listen to this. I hope you guys could hear that okay, but it sounds like there's just straight gravel in that water pump. I'm not sure how much longer that thing would have held on, but I'm willing to bet you it would not have been long. Thankfully, we are doing this entire job right now. Unfortunately, we cannot continue to use this water pump. Hey, whatever, win some, lose some. Overall, this car is in great shape otherwise. It just needs to be brought up to snuff with regards to all the maintenance. But if we take the glass half full look at this thing, we do get a free coolant flush out of it. Well, free, whatever. Free is relative. Alrighty, everyone. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call it there for today. We are at the halfway point with the exception of the water pump that still needs to be removed. As far as everything else goes, all of the major items that we need to do on this car, we are at the halfway point, and we are quite literally just needing to sit and wait for parts. They should be in within the next few days, and then we can start throwing this thing back together. But for now, we've got it all torn down, and it's just a matter of time till we can get this thing out on the autocross course. I am super excited for this thing. I hope you guys are too. This thing's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be even more fun to see how it pits against the Miatas, and specifically the Toyota 86s. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you, Toyota 86 guys. No, not really. It's all just good fun. But, you know, nonetheless, I do want to see how this thing does against them. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning into FunAhead TV. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps my channel out a lot. I will see you all, hopefully, in the next episode when we start putting this thing back together. Thanks. Oh, hey everyone, just a quick reminder, super high quality FunAhead TV merch is available on FunAheadTV.com right now. So head on over to FunAheadTV.com and get yourself some today. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Also, thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see even more great FunAhead TV content, please click the link right here. I'll see you over there.
Because of the way it is. Wow.